Imagine giving up your entire life for your child, only to one day discover that very same child plotting your destruction. That's exactly what happened to me. My name is Beatrice Collins. I'm 66 years old, and I never thought I'd be sharing a story like this. But what I'm about to tell you is a true family betrayal story that shook me to the core. It all began with a single voice message, a mistake. My daughter made a mistake that exposed every lie, every fake smile, every Sunday dinner that I thought meant love. In just 3 minutes of audio, I discovered that my only daughter, Sophia, was planning to throw me into a nursing home and steal the house I built brick by brick with 30 years of sweat. You need to understand how surreal this moment was. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't digging for secrets. My phone buzzed with a notification, and without thinking, I pressed play. What I heard was Sophia's voice, cold and sharp, in a way I had never heard before Daniel. I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. She's a nuisance. Those words didn't just hurt, they shattered something inside me. This was my little girl, the one I had sacrificed everything for calling me a burden, plotting my exile, like I was an old piece of furniture ready for the trash. And it didn't stop there. She laughed as she talked about finding a cheap place. Only $800 a month. Mom will never know what hit her. While my son-in-law Daniel agreed in the background. Then came the part that made my blood run cold. She had already checked the house papers, and with the help of her cousin, Monica Lopez, she planned to transfer my home into her name. My home. The only real asset I had left in this world. A home worth nearly $500,000, built not just with money, but with every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every prayer whispered over a pot of beans when I couldn't afford meat. In that instant, I realized my family betrayal was bigger than hurt feelings. It was a calculated scheme. They had planned doctor's visits, staged evaluations, fake social workers, everything designed to make it look like I was losing my mind. And all of it was being done by the very people who smiled at me over dinner, kissed me goodnight, and told me I was loved. I want you to imagine sitting alone in your kitchen, phone in hand, listening to your own child casually discuss throwing you away for profit. That was my reality. That was the moment I stopped being naive. And that was the moment my story of revenge, justice, and survival truly began. Because what my daughter didn't know is that I was not the weak, senile woman she thought I was. After 66 years on this earth, I had learned one thing: when you're betrayed by blood, sometimes the only way to survive is to fight back. When I first heard Sophia's words on that voice message, I thought maybe she was just venting, exaggerating in frustration. But very quickly, I realized this wasn't a passing complaint. This was a plan. A cold, calculated plan that involved not only her husband Daniel, but also Monica Lopez, my own niece, who worked at the county clerk's office. It wasn't just gossip, it was fraud. And I was the target. Sophia's voice in the recording still echoes in my mind. The house is technically in her name, but Monica already showed me how we can transfer it. It'll cost about $500 in bribes, but it's worth it. Once Mom is in the home, everything will belong to us. Daniel's laugh followed right after low and approving. He wasn't just going along, he was invested. He wanted my house, my savings, my freedom. The betrayal ran deeper than words. For months, Sophia and Daniel had been planting seeds, slowly crafting a narrative that I was losing touch. At first, I brushed off the little comments, "Mom, you've been so forgetful lately," or "Are you sure you should be driving at your age?" But then, they escalated. They told neighbors and even my closest friends that I was confused, that I sometimes thought night was morning, that I was acting irrationally. Lies. Cruel, deliberate lies meant to paint me as incompetent. And then came the strangers. Doctors I hadn't asked for showed up at my door claiming Sophia had scheduled checkups for my health. Social workers knocked unannounced holding clipboards and asking invasive questions about how I managed my daily life. I felt ambushed in my own home. Later, I overheard one of those doctors whispering to Sophia in my living room. She seems physically fine, but I'll note mild confusion in the report. My heart dropped. They weren't there to care for me. They were there to build a case against my sanity. What shook me most was realizing how coordinated it all was. Monica Lopez, using her position at the county office, quietly pulled property records and began drafting fraudulent transfer documents. She knew exactly what forms were needed, which signatures to fake, which loopholes to exploit. Daniel, meanwhile, scouted nursing homes. I learned from the recording that they had already visited St. Francis Home, where Sophia told the director I had early-stage dementia and it was dangerous for me to live alone. Dangerous I was still cooking, gardening, paying bills, running my life. But to them, none of that mattered. Their story was airtight on paper at least. Fake medical evaluations, forged signatures, social media whispers about my supposed confusion. And behind it all, my daughter's voice saying, "The plan is perfect. She'll never suspect. By the time she realizes, we'll already have legal guardianship." It's hard to describe the feeling of sitting in your own home, the house you cleaned and paid for 1 hour at a time across 3 decades, and knowing that the people eating at your table were planning your erasure. Every smile was fake. Every "I love you" rehearsed. Even the breakfasts Sophia brought me in bed, which I once thought were acts of love, I now understood as tactics, keeping me calm, making me trust her while she built my living funeral. The cruelest part was how they mocked me. In the message, after laying out their scheme, Sophia laughed and said no more Sundays, pretending to like her horrible food, no more listening to her boring stories. We'll finally live in peace without that bitter old woman controlling us. Daniel chuckled, adding something about using the money to remodel the kitchen. My kitchen. The one I had scrubbed 1,000 times with hands so raw I had to wrap them at night. Their betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about contempt. To them, I wasn't a mother. I wasn't a woman who had sacrificed everything. I was an obstacle, a wallet, a stepping stone to a more comfortable life. They wanted me gone because my very presence reminded them of a debt they could never repay. Monica, who I once gave Christmas presents to when she was a child, turned her back without hesitation. For a small bribe and the promise of a favor, she was willing to falsify documents that would strip me of everything. She told Sophia, "Don't worry. Once we file these, no judge will question it. With the doctor's notes, it'll look like your mother can't make decisions for herself." I know this because I heard Sophia brag about it in the recording. My niece, my blood, used her government position to prepare my downfall. Daniel played his role with chilling ease. He would make comments around the house, like, "This place is too much for you, Beatrice. At your age, you can't manage all this upkeep." Out loud, it sounded like concern. But behind the scenes, it was ammunition. He even told someone on the phone, "Yeah, we're already living here. She doesn't suspect a thing. Papers will be ready in 2 weeks." Looking back, all the pieces fit together. The forgotten invitations to family events, the excuses for not answering my calls, the sudden control over my bank bills. They were isolating me, weakening my credibility, so that when the time came to lock me away, nobody would question it. That's betrayal at its purest. Not an angry fight, not a misunderstanding, but a long, careful dismantling of a mother's dignity by the very people she raised and loved. And the worst part, for a brief moment, I doubted myself. When neighbors started whispering, when my friend Helen Brooks looked at me with pity and said, "At least you have Sophia to take care of you," I felt the weight of their lies pressing in. I asked myself, was I really confused? Was I losing my grip? But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't crazy. They were just really good at pretending. What they didn't know was that I had something they lacked: resilience. They thought I would fold quietly, surrender my house, surrender my mind. But they underestimated me. They forgot who built the life they now wanted to steal. They forgot the woman who once survived on $20 a day to pay for her daughter's future. And as I listened to that voice message over and over again, the betrayal that once crushed me started to harden into something else: determination. After I discovered the voice message, so many things from the past months suddenly made sense. All the kindness, all the so-called care, every smile, and every soft tone, it wasn't love, it was strategy. My daughter Sophia and her husband Daniel weren't nurturing me. They were slowly tightening a leash around my neck, making me feel safe and loved while stripping away my independence one piece at a time. At first, it looked like affection. Sophia would bring me breakfast in bed, setting down a tray of eggs and toast with a kiss on my forehead. "I just want you to relax, Mom," she would say, smiling sweetly. I remember feeling touched, grateful that after years of sacrifice, my daughter was finally taking care of me. But now I know the truth. Those breakfasts weren't for love. They were to keep me calm, to make me think I had nothing to worry about while she secretly arranged my downfall. Daniel, too, played his part. He would pat my shoulder and say things like, "Don't worry about the bills, Beatrice. You've done enough. Let us handle it now." At first, I thought it was kindness. But within weeks, they had quietly shifted all my mail to their attention. Bank statements, electricity bills, even my insurance paperwork. They began opening them by mistake. And soon, it became routine. "Mom, you don't need to stress over numbers. You're too old for that," Sophia told me. Too old. That phrase stung, but I forced myself to smile. What I didn't know was that she had already forged a letter authorizing her access to my accounts. They presented themselves to the neighbors as the perfect devoted children. Mrs. Green, my neighbor of over 30 years, once told me, "You're lucky, Beatrice. I see Sophia and Daniel coming over all the time. They really look after you." I smiled weakly, hiding the knot in my stomach because behind closed doors, the reality was different. Yes, they visited often, but not to love me. They came to move furniture without asking, to throw away my dishes, calling them outdated, to donate my clothes without permission. Every corner of my home began to change until it no longer felt like mine. One moment that still haunts me was when they invited me to join them for lunch. I arrived at the restaurant on time, clutching my purse, only to wait alone for nearly an hour. They never showed. Later, Sophia called casually. "Oh, Mom, we forgot to tell you we had to cancel. Daniel had a work emergency. This didn't just happen once, it happened 3 times in 2 months." Each time I sat surrounded by families laughing together while I stared at the empty seat across from me. Do you know how humiliating it is to realize your own daughter lured you into loneliness just to prove you were forgetful or confused? The isolation spread to family events. I found out through Mrs. Green that Sophia and Daniel had hosted a huge barbecue for Daniel's birthday. She said, "Beatrice, I was surprised not to see you there. I saw them buying enough meat for 20 people at the supermarket." I confronted Sophia afterward, and she shrugged it off. "Oh, Mom, it was really informal. We didn't want to bother you." Not bother me, I was their mother yet. I was treated like an outsider in my own family. They also used subtle comments to make me doubt myself. Mom, are you sure you remembered to turn the stove off? Daniel would ask, even when he had just seen me double-check it. Mom, Daniel says he noticed you repeat yourself a lot lately. Sophia once told me, planting the idea that others were concerned about my mind. These weren't random slips. They were deliberate whispered daggers meant to convince me and everyone else that I was losing my grip. Even the moments of affection were poisoned. Sophia would sit beside me on the couch, holding my hand as if she were the perfect, loving daughter. I love you, Mom. You know I just want what's best for you, she'd whisper. But then, in the background, I'd hear Daniel on the phone, telling someone she doesn't suspect a thing. Monica says the papers will be ready in 2 weeks. They hugged me with one arm while holding a knife behind their back. The cruelty wasn't just in the lies. It was in how they tried to make me complicit in my own destruction. They insisted on handling my shopping. You don't need to go out anymore, Mom. We'll buy everything for you. Soon my fridge was stocked with what they wanted, not what I liked. They insisted on driving me places. It's too dangerous for you to drive, Daniel said, taking my car keys. Suddenly I wasn't free to go to the market or visit friends. My world grew smaller each day, and they disguised it as care. They even began speaking for me. Once, when my longtime friend Helen Brooks came by, Sophia said, "Oh, Helen, Mom's been so confused lately. Yesterday, she thought it was morning at 10 at night. A total lie." I saw the pity in Helen's eyes as she looked at me, and I wanted to scream, but I just sat there stunned, realizing my own daughter was publicly rewriting my identity. The hardest part was how convincing they were to outsiders. To anyone looking in, Sophia and Daniel seemed like the ideal caregivers, devoted and responsible. But I knew the truth. Their affection was theater. Their kindness, a performance staged to cover the slow theft of my autonomy. I wish I could say I confronted them immediately, but the truth is, I stayed silent. I convinced myself maybe they were stressed. Maybe they didn't mean harm. I clung to the hope that I was imagining it, that the daughter I raised couldn't be this cruel. But deep down I knew that every kiss, every hug, every breakfast in bed was part of a larger act designed to erase me from my own life. And that realization was far more painful than any shouted insult could ever be. Because betrayal hidden under the mask of love cuts the deepest. When I look back on my life, I realize that every choice I made, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, it was all for my daughter. I was only 18 when I became a mother. Sophia's father vanished overnight, leaving me with nothing but a broken promise and a child growing inside me. His parents slammed the door in my face, saying he had a future to protect and that I was nothing but a mistake. I remember standing in the rain that night, tears mixing with the cold drops, clutching my belly and wondering how I would survive. But I didn't collapse. I couldn't, because even before she was born, I loved my daughter with every fiber of my being. My own mother stepped in and showed me what strength really meant. She worked as a seamstress from dawn until nearly midnight, hands swollen and eyes strained, and still she found room to support me. She sold her only 2 gold bracelets, heirlooms from her own mother, just to buy me the crib and baby clothes I couldn't afford. She hugged me and said, "That child is your greatest treasure, Beatrice. Give her everything. She will take care of you when you're old." Those words became my mission. When Sophia was born, it was as if an angel had entered my life. Her tiny hands wrapped around my finger, her big brown eyes staring at me like I was her whole world. I swore to myself that day she would never feel abandoned. She would never go without. And so, I worked harder than I ever thought possible. At 19, I was scrubbing floors and cleaning houses, making barely $20 a day. My hands cracked from bleach, my knees ached from kneeling. But when I walked home, holding Sophia's little hand, and she kissed me on the cheek, saying, "Thank you, Mom. You're the best in the world," all the exhaustion melted away. I remember her first day of kindergarten. We walked because we couldn't afford the bus. My dress was patched, my shoes worn, but she looked perfect in her ironed uniform and shiny shoes. Other mothers arrived in shiny cars, wearing perfume and silk blouses. I felt small and out of place, but then she kissed me and said, "I love you, Mommy," and I knew I had everything that mattered. When she turned 15, I worked 6 months of extra shifts just to give her a proper birthday celebration. I spent $3,500 money I had been saving to fix the leaking roof. But when I saw her glow in her golden dress, dancing and laughing with friends, I thought to myself, this is worth every penny. That night, she hugged me and whispered, "One day, I'll give this back to you 1,000 times more." I believed her. College was a mountain I thought I could never climb. $15,000 a year for tuition. I was making only $400 a month. It was impossible, math. But mothers do the impossible. I sold the engagement ring her father had once given me, the sewing machine my own mother left me. And I even put the house up as collateral for a loan. The day I watched Sophia sign her enrollment papers, I cried tears of joy. I told her, "You'll be a professional. You'll never have to clean other people's houses like your mother did." That dream fueled me for 4 years of endless work surviving on beans and tortillas, so she could have books, projects, and clothes for her presentations. When she graduated, walking across the stage in her cap and gown, hearing the applause, I thought my sacrifices had been rewarded. She hugged me crying and said, "Mom, this is as much yours as it is mine. I promise you'll never suffer again." I held on to those words like a sacred vow. So imagine, after all of that, hearing her voice years later, cold and detached, calling me a nuisance. Imagine listening to her plot with her husband to steal the very house I built for her security. Imagine realizing that every gift, every opportunity, every chance I bled for had turned into ammunition for her to destroy me. That is the depth of betrayal I felt. It wasn't just that she wanted my money. It was the erasure of my sacrifices, the rewriting of our history. She told Daniel in that message that my food was horrible, my stories boring. My food, the same meals I cooked when we had nothing, the meals she once begged me to make again. My stories, the ones I shared, so she would know her family's strength, so she would carry our legacy forward. To her, they were just noise. To me, they were the essence of love. The pain cut deeper because it came wrapped in laughter. In that recording, Sophia laughed as she plotted my exile. That laugh replayed in my mind like a knife twisting in an old wound. How could the girl who once promised me the world, who once clung to me as her hero, laugh about throwing me away? I think what hurt the most was realizing that the prophecy my mother gave me had failed. She told me that if I gave Sophia everything, she would take care of me in my old age. I believed it with my whole heart, but instead of care, Sophia offered betrayal. Instead of protection, she offered abandonment. And the one person I trusted most in the world turned into my greatest enemy. Looking back on my youth, I see the sweat, the pain, the sacrifices etched into every year. But when I look at Sophia's betrayal, I realize those sacrifices became invisible to her. And that invisibility, that ingratitude, is a pain deeper than poverty. deeper than hunger. It is the pain of realizing that your life's work, your child looks at you and sees nothing but a burden. The night after I heard that devastating voice message, I did not sleep a single minute. I walked through every room of my house, staring at the walls I had painted with my own hands, the furniture I had bought secondhand and polished until it gleamed, the photographs that told the story of my life. Everything felt like it was already slipping away, like Sophia and Daniel were already erasing me from the home I had built. But as dawn approached, something inside me shifted. The grief and fear hardened into determination. I wasn't going to wait for them to destroy me. I was going to fight back. At exactly 5 a.m, I got dressed with more care than I had in years. I chose my crimson suit, the one I had worn to Sophia's college graduation. It wasn't just clothing. It was armor. I wanted to look in the mirror and see not a victim, not a fragile old woman, but a woman of dignity, strength, and resolve. I fastened the pearl earrings my mother left me, applied my makeup with steady hands, and wrote a short note for Sophia on the kitchen table. Left early to take care of personal matters. Love, Mom. I didn't owe them an explanation, but I wanted them to underestimate me, to believe I was still naive. My first stop was the bank. As soon as the doors opened at 8 o'clock, I walked in with my head held high. Clara Mitchell, the branch manager who had known me for 15 years, looked up in surprise. "Good morning, Mrs. Collins. How can I help you today?" I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Clara, I need to review every transaction on my account for the last 6 months, and I want to change all beneficiaries immediately." She frowned clearly, sensing the seriousness. After a few clicks on her computer, her expression darkened. "Mrs. Collins, it looks like your daughter Sophia has made multiple inquiries into your account. She even presented a letter authorizing her access." My blood boiled. "Show me the letter I demanded." Clara slid it across the desk. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. The slant was wrong, the pressure uneven. "This is a forgery," I said, holding up my ID. Clara nodded gravely. "We'll cancel all unauthorized access right away. And I recommend you file a fraud report." I told her I would. But first, I secured my finances. I transferred all $8,750 of my savings into a new account under my sole control, changed every password, and rewrote my life insurance beneficiary to the Silver Horizon Foundation, a charity for abandoned seniors. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, knowing Sophia would never see a cent of it. From the bank, I went straight to the county clerk's office where Monica Lopez worked. My niece looked startled when I appeared at her desk recorder, hidden in my purse. Aunt Beatrice. "What a surprise! Sophia didn't tell me you were coming," she stammered. I smiled politely. "I just came to check on some property paperwork. My daughter mentioned you've been helping her." Her hands shook as she tried to shuffle papers out of sight. But I leaned forward and said softly, "Monica, I know everything. I know about the forged documents, the fake reports, and the plan to steal my house. And I have proof." I played a snippet of the voice message on my phone. Monica went pale. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "I didn't want to do it, Aunt Beatrice. Sophia said you couldn't take care of yourself anymore. She promised me money if I helped her." My voice was steel. "Don't lie to me. This was about greed. Now you have 2 options. Help me reverse everything you've done, or I will take this evidence straight to your supervisor and the police." She broke down, begging me not to ruin her job. Over the next 2 hours, she walked me through every fraudulent file, forged signatures, fabricated medical reports, property transfer documents. She gave me copies of all of them, signed a confession, and even showed me who else in the office had been covering up similar frauds. I left with a folder, thick with evidence, and the knowledge that my own niece's betrayal was deeper than I imagined. But I wasn't finished. My final stop that day was the office of attorney Jonathan Reed, one of the most respected lawyers in the city. I placed the thick folder on his desk and said, "Mr. Reed, I need your help to stop a fraud and protect my rights." He examined the documents carefully, his face tightening with every page. "Mrs. Collins, this is a very serious case. We have enough to press civil and criminal charges, fraud, falsification, conspiracy." He looked me in the eyes. "What outcome do you want?" I took a deep breath. "Justice. And I want my daughter to learn that actions have consequences. For 66 years, I've been generous, forgiving, too good for my own good. Now it's time to fight back." Jonathan nodded. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." Together we drafted lawsuits and complaints, preparing a legal storm Sophia and Daniel would never see coming. By the time I left his office, the sun was setting, but I felt like a new woman. That morning, I had walked out of my house wearing a crimson suit. By nightfall, I had become something else entirely, not a victim, but a survivor preparing for war. The following morning, I sat in my living room in silence, waiting for the storm to arrive. I had left the note the day before, pretending everything was normal, and Sophia and Daniel greeted me that morning with the same fake warmth they always used. Sophia smiled sweetly and asked, "Did you get everything done yesterday, Mom?" Daniel leaned back on the couch, his arms stretched casually over the cushion, as if he owned the place. "Yeah, you were gone a long time. Running errands." I smiled faintly, hiding the fire burning inside me. "Yes, honey," I said calmly. I took care of exactly what I needed to. They didn't know that within the next hour, their entire world would collapse. At precisely 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I stood quickly before either of them could move. When I opened the door, there stood attorney Jonathan Reed, 2 police officers, and a notary. Sophia's smile faltered. Daniel sat up straight, his expression shifting to suspicion. "Good morning, Mrs. Collins," Jonathan said formally. "We've come to execute the orders we discussed yesterday." I stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. Sophia frowned. "Mom, what's going on? Who are these people?" I walked to my favorite armchair and sat down, my crimson suit still sharp, my back straight. "Sit down, Sophia." "Sit down, Daniel. It's time you learn the truth." The officers flanked the room while Jonathan opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. He cleared his throat. "Ms. Sophia Collins and Mr. Daniel Harris, we have gathered irrefutable evidence of fraud, falsification of documents, and conspiracy to illegally appropriate the property of Mrs. Beatrice Collins." Sophia's face turned pale. "That's ridiculous," she shouted. "We would never." But I raised my hand and interrupted her. "Enough lies, Sophia. Would you like me to play the voice message you accidentally sent me?" Her mouth dropped open. What I pulled out my phone, pressed play, and let the room fill with her voice. "Daniel, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. She's a nuisance. I found a place for $800 a month, and with Monica's help, we'll transfer the house to our name. In a month, she'll be in the home and we'll own everything." Sophia froze, her hands trembling, her lips parting as her own words echoed around the room. Daniel cursed under his breath, his fists clenching. "Turn that off," Sophia screamed, lunging toward me, but one of the officers stepped forward and blocked her. I leaned back in my chair, calm, almost cold. "Relax, honey. This is just the beginning." Jonathan continued placing forged bank authorization documents on the coffee table. "This is the letter you submitted to the bank granting access to your mother's accounts. The signature is a forgery, confirmed by the bank manager. And here, He pulled out another stack. These are the fraudulent medical reports declaring Mrs. Collins mentally incompetent. They have been verified as false by Dr. Samuel Clark, who examined Mrs. Collins yesterday and found her in excellent cognitive health. Sophia shook her head wildly. That's not true, Monica. That is, Monica must have lied to you. Jonathan smiled faintly. Actually, Monica Lopez has signed a sworn confession detailing your role in pressuring her to forge documents and commit fraud. She also provided copies of the paperwork you prepared to transfer the property. I reached into my purse and pressed another button on my recorder. Monica's tearful voice filled the room. Sophia told me her mother couldn't take care of herself. She showed me how to forge the signature and promised me $2,000 once she had the house. Daniel slammed his fist on the table. This is a setup. You're manipulating her. I turned my gaze to him, my voice steady. No, Daniel. This is justice. What was a nightmare was living under my own roof, listening to you whisper about how to steal my life while pretending you cared. Jonathan placed yet another folder on the table. We also have proof of unauthorized withdrawals from Mrs. Collins's account. $8,750 taken over 6 months. In addition, here is the receipt for a $1,200 deposit paid to St. Francis Home for Mrs. Collins's admission, signed without her knowledge. The officers exchanged glances of disgust. Sophia began to cry, but not with remorse, with desperation. Mom, please, we just wanted to take care of you. You were forgetting things. We thought it would be safer. I stood up, my voice rising for the first time. Enough, I am not confused. I am not senile. I have managed my life, my finances, my home, all while helping you every time you asked. And you repaid me by plotting my exile and laughing about my death. The room fell silent. Even the officers looked shaken at the raw pain in my words. Jonathan gave a final nod to the officers. Given the evidence, we are ready to proceed with charges of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted illegal guardianship. One officer stepped forward and pulled out handcuffs. Sophia Collins, Daniel Harris, you are under arrest. I watched as they were restrained in my living room. Sophia sobbed, Mom, please. You can't do this. I'm your daughter. I'm all you have. I looked at her, my heart heavy but resolute. No, Sophia. You had me, and you chose to throw me away. Daniel glared at me with hatred as they led him out. This isn't over, you crazy old woman. You'll pay for this. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. For the first time, I had taken my life back. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. The moment Sophia and Daniel were led out of my house in handcuffs, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief because no mother wants to see her child in chains. Relief because the nightmare I had lived in silence was finally being exposed to the world. But the arrest was only the beginning. What followed over the next months showed me that betrayal, once revealed, always brings consequences. Within a week, Sophia and Daniel were released on bail. They came back to the neighborhood, not in shame, but in defiance. Sophia posted smiling photos online with captions like, "Don't believe everything you hear," and "Family drama makes people exaggerate." Daniel swaggered around telling neighbors I was losing it, and that they were only trying to protect me. For a moment, I feared their lies might drown out the truth. But then, the real weight of the evidence began to settle. Jonathan Reed filed civil suits for fraud in unauthorized withdrawal of funds. The bank submitted sworn testimony about the forged letter. Monica's signed confession became public record. And the voice message, that damning voice message circulated through the courtroom until even the most skeptical judge had no doubts. Sophia and Daniel tried to fight. Their lawyer argued that the recording was taken out of context. They said the money they withdrew was for household expenses. They claimed the nursing home deposit was just a temporary plan. But the documents, the receipts, and Monica's trembling signature spoke louder than their excuses. The judge ordered them to repay the $8,350 they had stolen, plus $15,000 in damages for emotional distress. When they heard the figure, Daniel's face turned purple with rage. Sophia wept uncontrollably, but this time, the courtroom had no sympathy. It wasn't just the money. Their reputations crumbled. Word spread quickly in the community. People who once admired Sophia for her devotion whispered about her betrayal. Mothers who had envied her for being such a dutiful daughter now crossed the street to avoid her. Daniel's co-workers mocked him openly. One even told me later, nobody trusts him anymore. Who would work with a man who tried to steal from his own mother-in-law? Their friends stopped inviting them to parties. Invitations dried up. Their faces, once familiar and welcomed, became symbols of greed and deceit. And then came the IRS. During the investigation, Jonathan flagged certain suspicious transactions in Daniel's name. He passed them along to the proper authorities. Within weeks, the IRS opened a file. They discovered unpaid taxes amounting to over $22,000 hidden income and questionable deductions. Sophia and Daniel, already drowning in debt from legal fees and court-ordered restitution, now faced a mountain they could not climb. The government placed lines on their accounts. Daniel's car, a shiny black SUV he once flaunted, was repossessed. Sophia's jewelry gifts she had shown off at every family gathering was pawned. The humiliation didn't stop there. Their smear campaign against me backfired spectacularly. On social media, they tried to paint me as senile, claiming I was hallucinating and fabricating stories. But the more they posted, the more people asked for proof. And when the court documents became accessible to the public, people saw everything for themselves. The forged signature, the fraudulent reports, Monica's confession, the audio file. Instead of turning people against me, their lies destroyed the last shreds of their credibility. I still remember the day Mrs. Green came to my door, clutching her hands. She said, "Beatrice, I owe you an apology. I believed them when they told me you were confused. I thought they were caring for you. I see now I was wrong." She wasn't the only one. Helen Brooks, my lifelong friend, broke down in tears when she realized she had pitied me for no reason. One by one, neighbors and acquaintances came forward to express their shame for believing Sophia's story. Each apology healed a small wound in my heart, but the scars remained. For Sophia and Daniel, life shrank. They moved into a cramped apartment far from the house they once dreamed of stealing. Daniel lost his job after the IRS case went public. Sophia, once a woman who posted smiling brunch photos with friends, now disappeared from social media entirely. When I saw her at the grocery store months later, she kept her head down, avoiding eye contact, as if the very sight of me reminded her of what she had lost. People often ask me if I felt satisfaction watching them fall. The truth is complicated. Part of me grieved for the daughter I had raised, for the love I thought would protect me in old age. But another part of me felt vindicated. Their fall was not my revenge. It was the natural result of their own actions. They dug their own grave with lies, greed, and arrogance. The biggest consequence wasn't financial or legal. It was social exile. Once you betray your own family for money, people never look at you the same. Sophia and Daniel became cautionary tales, whispered about at church, at markets, at neighborhood gatherings. Their names carried shame, and shame is a prison no bail can break. As for me, I finally breathed again. For the first time in months, I could sleep at night without checking if my documents were safe. I knew the law had spoken and justice had been done. Sophia and Daniel had tried to erase me, but in the end, it was they who vanished from society, from respect, from the comfortable life they thought they deserved. And I, the woman they underestimated, stood taller than ever. A full year passed after the trial before I heard from Sophia again. In that time, I had rebuilt my life, piece by piece. I focused on myself, on my health, my peace, and the freedom I had almost lost. My days no longer revolved around walking on eggshells in my own home. Instead, I painted, joined a support group, and volunteered at the Silver Horizon Foundation. I was learning what it meant to live for myself after 66 years of living for everyone else. Then, one quiet afternoon, a letter arrived. It was handwritten, the envelope sealed in a way that reminded me of the notes Sophia used to pass me in high school, little scribbles saying, "I love you, Mom," or "Thanks for making my favorite dinner." But this envelope was heavier, its weight filled with tension. On the front, in shaky handwriting, it read, "To Mom." I stared at it for a long time before I opened it. My hands trembled, not with weakness, but with memories. Part of me didn't want to read it. Part of me wanted to throw it in the trash to deny her any access to me. But another part of me, the mother in me, still needed to know what she had to say. Inside the letter was long written on several pages of lined paper. The first line cut straight to my heart. "Mom, I am sorry. Truly sorry." Sophia admitted everything. She confessed that greed had blinded her, that she had let Daniel convince her that the house, the money, even my freedom were worth sacrificing me for. She admitted to mocking me, to lying about me, to treating me as though I were disposable. She wrote, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed the bond we had. But I can't live with myself if I don't at least try to apologize." She wrote about the shame she lived with every day, how friends had abandoned her, how she had to avoid people at church because of the whispers, how Daniel's bitterness had poisoned even their marriage. She said, "I thought I was winning when I schemed against you, but I lost everything. And the truth is the thing I lost that hurts most is you." Tears filled my eyes as I read those words, but they were not the tears of the mother who once wept at her betrayal. These were different. They were the tears of a woman who had walked through fire and come out the other side stronger. I set the letter down and sat in silence for hours, letting every sentence settle in my soul. Did I forgive her? Yes, but forgiveness, I had learned, is not the same as trust. Forgiveness is letting go of the weight of anger, choosing not to poison yourself with hatred. Trust is earned, and Sophia had shattered it beyond repair. I wrote her a letter in return. I kept it short, measured, and honest. "Sophia, I received your letter. I believe you when you say you're sorry. I accept your apology. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry bitterness in my heart. But forgiveness is not reconciliation. I cannot allow you back into my life. I wish you peace, but we will walk separate paths from now on." It was one of the hardest things I have ever written. As a mother, every instinct screamed at me to reach out to give her another chance, to hope she could change. But as a woman who had survived her own child's betrayal, I knew I had to draw the line. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are protection. When I mailed the letter, I felt both sorrow and freedom. I knew Sophia would cry, maybe even beg again. But my decision was final. I had forgiven her, yes. But I would never again let her hold the keys to my heart, or my home, or my dignity. A few weeks later, I heard through Mrs. Green that Sophia had moved out of state away from the gossip and the judgment. Perhaps she wanted a fresh start. Perhaps she wanted to escape the shadow of what she had done. I didn't wish her harm. In fact, I hoped she truly found the humility and strength to build a better life. But I knew that whatever life she built, it would not include me. And that was okay, because forgiveness gave me peace, but distance gave me freedom. For the first time in decades, I felt both. When people in my support group ask me about Sophia, now I tell them the truth. Yes, I forgave her. No, I don't see her anymore. Sometimes love means letting go, not holding on. The woman who once lived for everyone else finally understood that she was allowed to live for herself. When everything was finally settled, I made one last decision. I sold the house, the same house Sophia and Daniel tried so hard to steal. People asked me, Beatrice, how could you let it go after everything you fought for? But here's the truth. Sometimes freedom isn't about clinging to walls and bricks. It's about letting go of the battlefield so you can step into peace. That house held memories of sacrifice, but it also held shadows of betrayal. I chose not to live among ghosts. With the money, I bought a small apartment in a senior community. Nothing extravagant, but filled with sunlight, laughter, and safety. For the first time in decades, every corner of my home belonged only to me. No whispers, no lies, no footsteps plodding in the hallways. Just quiet, just freedom. I threw myself into new passions, painting, dancing, volunteering with the Silver Horizon Foundation. I began speaking publicly about my story, and soon people started coming to me. Elderly men and women trembling with the same fear I once carried whispered, Beatrice, you gave me courage. If you could stand up to your own family, maybe I can too. Some called me a survivor. Others called me a symbol of justice. But I simply saw myself as a woman who had finally learned to choose dignity over silence. And if my journey could inspire even one person to draw their boundaries, to fight for their worth, then every scar I carried was worth it. In the end, I discovered something powerful. Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by respect. If someone, even your own child, strips away your dignity, then love without boundaries becomes self-destruction. So here is my truth, and I want you to remember it. It is never too late to reclaim your voice, your freedom, and your worth. Never. If my story touched, you don't just move on, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, have you ever faced betrayal from someone you loved? Save this video so you can come back when you need strength. And if you believe more people should hear stories like mine, hit subscribe right now. Because this isn't just my story, it could be yours or someone you love. And together, by speaking up, we break the silence that allows betrayal to grow.